Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Laurie Gagan, and I am one of the co-hosts on the Wellness Crusaders podcast, hosted on MainStreetMediaUtah.org, also known as KMMU.org. We are one of the only stations where you will get the truth on what is really happening in the state of Utah, not only on what's happening in mental health, what's happening with COVID, what's happening with election fraud, but everything that you're going to want to know in health and wellness and in the political arena. Tonight, I actually am really honored that I have both Dr. Richard Fleming. Dr. Richard Fleming is a nuclear physicist, an MD, a PhD, and a JD. Yep, you heard that right. He's all of that wrapped into one package. And Dr. Fleming has been researching gain of function for over 4 decades. His knowledge with the gain of function research has more evidence of the actual crime against humanity than any other doctor out there. And he has actually been talking about SARS-CoV-2, the virus, probably the longest of any doctor. And I do have to admit, he's quite charming. So we are joined tonight also with Dr. Kirk Moore. Dr. Kirk Moore is a board-certified plastic surgeon, also speaking out and speaking the truth on the bioweapon. Yet, unfortunately, the corruption of our government has caused him harm in what he's doing and trying to get the truth out there. And you will find the truth this evening on what is happening to Dr. Kirk Moore, who lives in your state of Utah. So, but before I bring them in, what I would like to do is talk about the Wellness Crusaders mission. So the Wellness Crusaders internet radio show weaves together the critical and often overlooked aspects of wellness, including the crucial role of soil health. This engaging series unveils a crucial truth that the health of our soil is deeply intertwined with nutrition, climate, and the sustenance of all life on Earth. For years, the rampant use of chemical farming methods has drastically depleted essential soil nutrients, leading to a decline in plant health and our overall well-being. These podcasts emphasize that nutrient-rich, high-quality food is the foundation of our mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual health. We address the critical issues of our diets being deficient in essential nutrients, amino acids, a problem increasingly linked to the rise in mental and physical health challenges. The Wellness Crusaders not only highlight these issues, but we also give you answers and solutions. Upholding the wisdom of Hippocrates, let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. We are committed to empowering lives, inspiring wellness, and offering solutions. And we hope you will join our crusade. And just a few disclaimers that the listeners understand that the role of a health coach is not to prescribe or assess micro and macronutrient levels, to provide healthcare, medical, or nutrition therapy services, or to diagnose, treat, or cure any disease, condition, or other physical or mental ailment of the human body. Rather, the certified holistic health coach is a mentor and a guide who has been trained for decades in holistic health to help clients positive, sustainable lifestyle changes. We are not acting in the capacity of a doctor, a licensed dietitian, a licensed nutritionist, psychologist, or any other licensed or registered professional, and that any advice given by the certified holistic health coach is not meant to take the place or advice by these professionals. If the listener is under the care of healthcare professional or currently uses prescription medications, the client should always discuss any dietary changes or potential dietary supplement use with his or her doctor and should never discontinue any prescription medications without first consulting his or her doctor. The listener understands that the information mentioned in our talks should not be seen as medical or nursing advice, and again, is not meant to take the place of seeing a licensed healthcare professional. And now to get started, I would like to bring in Dr. Fleming and Dr. Kirk Moore. So, thank you and welcome to MainStreetMediaUtah.org on the Wellness Crusaders podcast. I'm honored to have both of you on the same talk today. Dr. Fleming, we go back many years when we first met you, when you were doing your tour on the crimes against humanity, when you actually released and wrote the book, Is COVID-19 a Bioweapon? And since that release and all of your talks that have been going out to millions of people across the world, we have other heroes like Dr. Kirk Moore that have stood up in order to protect humanity. And now the corrupt government is actually coming after him. And we want to get his story out there because we know in the state of Utah that everything is covered up, that you have radio shows like KSL and the Salt Lake Tribune that people can no longer find the truth on. You get little blurbs of how someone broke some type of policy or little snips of something that is used to meant harm against the person and such, Dr. Kirk Moore. So again, I'm quite honored to have you out here. Dr. Moore, if you would just like to tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we're going to go ahead and get started with some questions.
Sure. Laurie, thanks for having me. Dr. Fleming, thanks for joining us. I'm, I guess, 59 years old now. Been in practice for 23 years and been in Utah for 17 of those. And been here, private practice, kind of minding my own business. And COVID hit. And just, I don't know, I just call it my common sense, my discernment, my inability to kind of trust what we're being told without any data or science or evidence or anything behind it. And I just became super skeptical of everything. I knew right off the bat that masks, social distancing stuff, just wasn't going to solve anything. So I was, pretty outspoken about it. I tried to never wear a mask, except when I was on an airplane trying to having to travel places. Then we just start hearing about the whole vaccine, nothing's going to get solved until we have a vaccine. I was vaccine injured in 1989 from a hepatitis B vaccine. And haven't had one since. And my kids haven't been vaccinated. So when I hear vaccines, it just kind of raises all kinds of antenna. Just kind of decided that I, wanted to do what I could to help prevent people from being injured. I met Brianne Dressen a long time ago when she was speaking at the state capitol here in support of a law to at least allow exemptions for anybody who wanted them. And we became close friends and realized everything that she was going through and all of the other people that she was in contact with through her organization called React 19. Just was doing my part to try to help people navigate through the whole COVID virus and the whole vaccine mandate stuff.
Okay. And then your practice again is located in which county of Utah?
So I'm in Salt Lake County, South End, Sandy, Midvale area, right off of real close to the I-15, 215 South interchange.
Okay, a lot of corruption there. So tell us a little bit about your case.
Yeah, so
as much as you can.
Yeah. Well, so I signed up to become a vaccine clinic in early 21, April, May timeframe. I provided vaccines to patients that came into us through the end of 2022. In January of 23, I was indicted on 3 charges of fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and counterfeiting. And I've been kind of in that limbo state now since that time. I was thrown in jail for 12 days as a flight risk, and got out, spent 2 months on an ankle monitor at home through the summer of, I guess, 23. And I've just been trying to navigate through the whole legal system as best we can. And where we stand right now is mainly 2 things. Our court case has been set for January 15th of 2025. And we have a motion from the prosecutor to prevent the use of what's called a necessity defense, or lesser of 2 evils defense, which means that, I wouldn't be allowed to present data and science and evidence in my mindset in terms of trying to prevent people from being injured from the vaccine, because I felt that was more dangerous based upon my own research than not getting the vaccine and getting COVID as a viral infection.
And have you found a lot of support? I know we hosted something for you because we wanted to get the word out there, and I know that others have also. Somebody that all 3 of us are familiar with, Dr. Fleming more than myself, is Carolina. Who is Carolina?
Yeah, Galvan.
Yes.
So she's, early on through the first part of 23, from January through May, we had gotten a lot of support and a lot of, I guess, publicity on kind of alternative channels. And we're doing a lot of podcasts. When I got thrown in jail and when I was on an ankle monitor, we kind of had to pull way back because I didn't want to get thrown back in jail again. So we had to scale it all back. We lost almost all, if not all, of our momentum at the time. And we had collected nearly $100,000 in legal defense funds around that time. And I think we're at about 110 or 111 now. So it hasn't really gone, much of anywhere. I've been trying to find the right attorneys, trying to, like I said earlier, navigate this whole scenario. It's not something that I'm used to kind of getting involved in. The process is the punishment here. They just kind of keep pushing, and they just bleed you dry until you kind of, I think what they try to do is just make it so that you can't afford to fight them anymore, because they're using your money and my money and tax money to prevent, me from doing my job. It's kind of like it's David versus Goliath scenario.
Right. So let's go ahead and start. Dr. Fleming, I know that you recently, and it's not out yet, but you recently published a new book. And Leighton, if you could put that book out, I would appreciate it. And I know that you've been doing a lot of talks also to help prevent these type of issues. The problem is if we're in a world where the government's not going to allow us to get the truth out there or prohibit us from bringing in the evidence or the truth. But tell us a little bit about that book. And I'm looking for, how will this book help Dr. Moore and other doctors like him, where the government is coming after them to not only take their license away, but honestly, get them thrown in jail?
Right. Before I do that, because I know you wanted me to approach it from that position, but I just want to address something based upon what Dr. Moore has said, and I think people need to understand this. There
Thank
is
you.
never a single criminal charge brought against somebody. Because if there's a single criminal charge, the prosecutors run the risk of losing. What is very well understood is that if you come up with multiple charges for somebody, typically what will happen is that the jury will think there must be something wrong or there wouldn't be this many charges. And juries like to, with the exception of what we just saw in the Trump case, like to give something to the prosecutor and something to the defendant, because then they feel less guilty themselves about having decided something. They've said, oh, you both have good points from both sides. And the consequence of that, what people don't grasp, is that if the prosecutor wins some and the defendant wins some, the defendant loses, right? I mean, that's the bottom line on how this game is played. So the multiple charges, including things like counterfeiting, from what little bit I've read of the case, my gut suspicion is that that's there simply so the jury will say, well, he didn't counterfeit anything, but he did these other things. So see, they give to both sides. So I just want to throw that out there so that people are aware of it, because I think that all too often when people hear multiple charges, they're thinking there must be really something wrong with the man. Otherwise, they wouldn't have all these charges. But the game is, you put a lot of stuff out there, something's going to stick because the jury won't side against the government, because as Americans, we have been raised to believe that our government is good, right? And that leads us into the book, all right? Because the book, Are We the Next Endangered Species? Bioweapons, Eugenics, and More, walks people through 170 years of U.S. history to show you, sadly enough, our government is not good. We had the United States of America probably for about 75, 80 years, and then it changed. Beginning in the 1850s, 1860s, this country that we think of when we think about the founding fathers, the Declaration of Independence changed, possibly because it took that long for the founding fathers and their influence to no longer be felt. As long as they were around, as long as they had influence, or their people that they trained had influence, we still had some rule of what the country was supposed to be. But about the 1850s, 1860s, that went away. And where most people think that what happened was the Civil War and we were doing away with slavery and we were all going to be this kumbaya society, what was really happening were two parallel pathways that Americans today have confused and pushed them together. And that's one of the biggest flaws in how people are responding to this. The two parallel pathways are, one, biological weapons, and two, eugenics programs. What Dr. Moore is dealing with is the eugenics program side of this. And it is a consequence of what happened because of a biological weapon that was funded by the US government, with more than half of it being the Department of Defense. And that funding led to SARS-CoV-2 viruses. And I say viruses because there's three of them: RS-3367, RS-SHC0, M15, and M14. And those viruses, which we've shown in the first book and in the second book in more detail, were funded by the DoD, the Health and Human Services Department, people that watch over healthcare, right, Dr. Moore? USAID, the NIH, NIAID. So the very people that were involved with this are the people that typically come after doctors. And so we've got these viruses that were being built. They're biological weapons. It's the confusion point that Dr. Fauci and others would like to put in there so that people don't understand what's going on is his hearing, a few days ago, was confusing to most people because the conversation became about gain of function. And I would argue that even though I've talked about it for years, most people really don't understand gain of function. And you can see that Dr. Fauci has done a great job of confusing people and saying, well, it's really not gain of function because the C3PO committee, which was the committee that was put together when the gain of function was banned in 2014, said, well, we're going to change the definition of gain of function. To that, I say, Shakespeare had a famous expression: a rose by any other name is still a rose. So you can change the name, but it doesn't change the consequences. The consequence of this viral manipulation, whether it's gain of function, whether it's what's known as serial passage, so you put some infectious disease through animals generation after generation after generation, and that bacteria or virus or whatever you're dealing with changes until it's now more aggressive, or any other science, any other tool, in the end, the result is a bioweapon. And since Dr. Fauci is fond of saying we're going to use the expert's definition of something, the definition of a bioweapon, according to the Biological Weapons Convention Treaty of 1975, the definition according to the 1989 Biological Anti-Terrorism Act, and the function definition of a bioweapon under the 2012 law that was passed, that's known as 18 U.S.C. Section 175, is when you take something, you make it or you take it out of nature and you change it so now it's more aggressive or pathogenic, harmful to people, you have made a bioweapon. So we have a bioweapon that is a criminal act, period. The other pathway that has been slowly but surely building over the last 170 years is the U.S. eugenics program, the selection of who should live and who should die. And that process began with, well, we're not going to let Eastern Europeans or Mediterraneans into the United States. Well, we need to do something to prevent these undesirable people in the United States from having children and reproducing. We need to have fewer of them, whether that had to do with the money that the Rockefeller Foundation paid out to Planned Parenthood and Margaret Sanger. And you're going to see in the book, there's QR codes that you will see actual documents from the Rockefeller Foundation that they probably would prefer aren't out, but that's on them because they're the ones who did this. And the funding for these eugenics programs in Nazi Germany. After Nazi Germany, we brought thousands of Nazis, scientists, physicians, intelligence officers out, put them in the US, put them in Russia, put them in Canada, put them in Britain, put them in France. Those countries should ring a bell because 4 of those are on the Security Council of the UN. And of those 5 nations, you add China into the US, Russia, Britain, and France, And you have the countries that control what goes on the planet. If one member of the Security Council says something's not going to happen, it's not going to happen. If all 5 of them vote something's going to happen, it's going to happen. And 4 of those countries have been infiltrated by Nazis because we took them out after World War II and put them in, including Dr. Bloom, and you'll read about him in the book, who was a physician that was actually on trial at Nuremberg, but was acquitted by the U.S. government and then brought into the United States. What did Dr. Bloom do? Well, Dr. Bloom experimented on children, twins. Dr. Bloom did aerosolized vaccine research to see what harm it would do. Dr. Bloom dropped anthrax on U.S. and Russian troops as they were advancing. And the U.S., in its infinite wisdom, got Dr. Bloom out, got him acquitted. Those really weren't crimes. Were those crimes, do you think, Dr. Moore? Do you think those were maybe crimes? I think it's hard-pressed to find somebody who would say it wasn't a criminal action to drop anthrax on U.S. troops or to use aerosolized vaccines to see what it would do, or to manipulate and try to see what you could do with twins. But he was acquitted thanks to the U.S. government, and then put into our government to run our research programs on these types of agents. These genetic vaccine or these eugenic programs really got a boost up with the genetic vaccines, and the goal was a very positive goal up front. It was to say, let's do away with some of these bad diseases. I know physicians, researchers like myself, who are very interested in these tools because they could see how it could benefit children with congenital heart disease to correct their genetic flaws. So instead of being 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, having to worry about going through multiple heart surgeries, I don't know, they might worry about riding a horse in Utah, right? Like a normal child would do. But those genetic vaccines weren't working, and they couldn't work because the mRNA, the messenger RNA that was being used, couldn't get inside cells. It would break down. And with the advent even of CRISPR technology, they couldn't get it into the cells until 2 researchers by the name of Perico and Weissman published their work in 2008, where they took part of the mRNA molecule, the nucleoside base known as uridine, moved a couple atoms around, and made it pseudouridine. Now, pseudouridine, they discovered, was very stable. So now they had a genetic treatment tool. They also looked to see if pseudouridine, the same thing that's in these mRNA vaccines, would cause an immune response from people. Could you use it as a vaccine? And the answer was, and they published this research, and it must have been good research because they got the Nobel Prize in Medicine last year for this work. The answer was, it doesn't make a vaccine because it won't stimulate the production of interferon. Now, those emergency use authorization documents on FlemingMethod.com, third column, number 2, 3, and 51 are the Pfizer, Moderna, and Janssen vaccines. Those are probably admissible in court because those are the emergency use authorization documents used to justify using these genetic vaccines. And you will notice that there was no benefit, no statistical reduction in COVID cases or deaths for vaccinated versus unvaccinated people. And you will not notice any data on interferon or anything else that should be there to justify using these as vaccines for people. The third thing they discovered was that these genetic vaccines with pseudouridine were very good for transfection tools. In other words, gene therapy. So the vaccines that you're having troubles with are not vaccines that have been shown to cause an immunologic response like vaccines are supposed to do. They are eugenic genetic vaccines that have been shown to be useful for changing human DNA. And the science of the day is they're doing this now. You read about it in the book with sickle cell. They're doing it with respiratory syncytial virus for influenza A, which, by the way, is what bird flu is. Bird flu is just one form of influenza A. For amyloidosis, for Down syndrome, for cancer. So what this book does is very clearly point out that the federal government of the United States has been actively involved in criminal actions of building biological weapons that got out and eugenics genetic programs that they just happen to use to dovetail and say, let's make vaccines using this technology, even though there was no evidence in the EUA documents that it worked. And even though I sat in personally, so if the prosecutors are listening to this, which I'm certain that you are, I sat in personally on some Zoom calls with the people that did Warp Speed, and they knew that it was glitched, but their answer was, let's get it out there, we'll have the problems, and then we can fix whatever the problems are once we've done it. Okay? So this is the US government. The problem for Americans is we want to think we're the good guys. And let me be very clear. Americans are the good guys. Our government is not. Chinese people are good people. Their government, not so much. During World War II, the German people were mostly good. Their government, not. And in World War II, the Japanese people that were in the United States, that were going to fight for the United States, were good people, and they were put in internment camps, concentration camps in the United States because they were Japanese, even though their husbands, sons, and brothers were going to fight the people that they emanated from in the Pacific. Why? Because they were representing Americans. They were Americans.
And so, with what you're just saying, they use that to come after people like Dr. Kirk Moore in order to hush him up, shut him up, put him away so we can't continue talking about the damage that the vaccines, say the gain of function.
Their argument against Dr. Moore not presenting evidence is that he's trying to minimize the lesser wrong. Well, here's the argument, an important argument. Who did the greater wrong? They're trying to minimize their involvement, their wrong, by shoving it on him and using him and using others who have disagreed with them as the bad guy, because of course the US government couldn't be the bad guy. Well, the reality is, in this situation, both the biological weapon and the insertion of eugenic genetic vaccines with no proof that they were beneficial, and all the evidence that resulted in a Nobel Prize last year showing it doesn't work as a vaccine. They're trying to say, don't look at our wrongs, look at Dr. Moore. And we don't want Dr. Moore to present his evidence because he's saying, well, he did the lesser of two evils. Well, at least we can agree on something. There's more than one evil going on here. The question is, who really has the higher moral ground here? And I know that we don't care about morals and ethics in the judicial system, because I can tell you, if you want to get a chuckle out of an attorney or a law student or their professors, you ask the question, which we did up front when we were law students, and ask the question if it's about justice. and you'll get that resounding chuckle by somebody going, this has nothing to do with justice. You know, let's look at where the justice of the United States comes from. The Supreme Court determines everything in the United States that's legal or not. All right. Do you know why that is? It's a case that was heard very early in the country called Marbury v. Madison. And when Thomas Jefferson was coming into office, his Secretary of State, Marshall, signed off or was supposed to sign off on padding the judiciary. Not a good thing, but that was his job. And unfortunately, he didn't execute it. Jefferson gets brought in and inaugurated. And where does Marshall go? Marshall moves laterally and becomes one of the justices on the Supreme Court of the United States. Then these other people come up and they complain, and Jefferson says, we're not going to allow these people to pad the court because those orders didn't go out, and I'm now president. So here is Madison, or Marshall rather, on the Supreme Court hearing the case, and Marshall says, you're right, Mr. President, none of those orders are important because we're the Supreme Court and we say what the law of the land is. And so all he did was he moved from being under the President of the United States, the Secretary of State, under the Supreme Court, and he gave himself and the Supreme Court ultimate power, which is kind of an interesting perspective because there is Article 1, Congress, Article 2, Executive or President, Article 3, the Supreme Court. Which one of those groups is not elected by the people that as representatives of the country? Well, Congress is, and the president is, but the Supreme Court isn't. And the Supreme Court, with Marbury versus Madison, established itself as we tell you what's right. In fact, when we talk about the amendments to the Constitution, you know, the 7th Amendment, which talks about a jury trial, that was ruled on by the Supreme Court. You don't have a right to a jury trial unless it's a criminal case. Civil cases, even though it says you have a right to a jury trial, the Supreme Court ruled the 7th Amendment is only partially constitutional. The 9th and the 10th Amendments to the Constitution that everybody talks about when they say if it's not written down in the Constitution, it belongs to the people, those have never been heard by the Supreme Court. So guess what? The legal language for that is we don't know whether the 9th and 10th Amendments to the Constitution are constitutional, which is kind of funny because the reason why those amendments are there is because the founding fathers had to make a decision when they were fighting the British. We had something known as the Articles of Confederation. That's what we were running the country on. And they were a blithering disaster because Washington couldn't get troops from one state to another state to go and defend against the British. So the founding fathers went back, looked at the articles and said, that's it, it doesn't work. We're going to make a document called the United States Constitution that gives all of the power in the country to the federal government. It's called a Federalist document, and it's why people should go read the Federalist Papers, because the founding fathers wrote down in the Federalist Papers what they were thinking. And they said, they agreed. And by the way, the founding fathers, Dr. Moore, you're going to love this. And for those of you out there who don't know it, I'm a convicted felon. So that's because I chose to protect my patients, reduce the radiation, and build the way the federal code said to, but Big Pharma didn't like it because it cut into their pocket. And my evidence didn't get presented either, evidence of actual innocence. Mine didn't, President Trump's didn't. This is what you're fighting, Dr. Moore. You're fighting a system where the federal government holds all the cards, and we've given them carte blanche to do it because we haven't reined them in yet. But the founding fathers said, okay, we're going to give you all this power because we've got to be able to have a situation where if Washington says, I need troops, they go. And the founding fathers have a clause in the Constitution. It's an amendment clause put there because they knew they would have to come back and fight tooth and nail and write it as an amendment to the Constitution. They amended. That means they changed the Constitution. In the Constitution, to give back those rights, and the Supreme Court has chipped away at them in the ways I just told you. All right.
So let me just ask you a question because you're talking the Constitution, and Dr. Moore, feel free to chime in whenever. I mean, you kind of just covered a lot, and you actually covered your case and how it was also just nothing but government corruption. Is there is there anything in the Constitution that doctors like Dr. Moore should concentrate on? There's got to be some type of protection. I mean, it's just government corruption. Yeah, and I'm just going to put this out there. We already know that Governor Cox, who we're hoping we're going to boot his butt out, is totally corrupt and took COVID money that there's no trail on. But there's got to be something in the corruption on what's happening not only to Dr. Moore, but other doctors across the country.
Here's the reality. The answer to your question is there's not. The book, Are We the Next Endangered Species, not only lays out 170 years of history so that you know what happened, so you don't have doubts in your mind. So you can go read the documents or take the QR codes and see the documents and listen to me walk you through them, either by audio file or video file, so you get it. Like even the WHO documents we've been talking about. But we're not going to go down that rabbit hole now because we have this one to address and we need to dig out the varmints that are in the rabbit hole, okay? And where Fed would be very happy with that, right? So in the book, we also have how do we move forward? One are the criminal indictments against Fauci.
And I just want to, sorry not to interrupt you, Dr. Moore, that book is coming out in July. So that will be one that we're going to want to get you as soon as we can so that you can read it.
Yeah, so I saw that it was being published middle of July, so a month and a half from now.
And I just want to put out there all that stuff that I said about Cox. That's my personal opinion and what I'm alleging. I think a lot of people in Utah are right there with me, but
we used to have it used to be a semi-free society where people could express their opinions. So one part of it is how we go after these people, and I've laid out the criminal case, and it will win. The second part is how we address the genetic vaccines, the eugenic genetic vaccines, because people have been going at those incorrectly. They have been saying that, and listen up, Dr. Moore, they have been saying that the Supreme Court said there must be this Protection Act for vaccines because you can't make a safe vaccine. The Supreme Court did say that, but that wasn't the basis of their opinion. Their opinion and what they ruled on that resulted in the Vaccine Act being upheld was that the Supreme Court, and it's laid out in the book. I don't want people to have to try to, it's there black and white. You'll be able to find it. The Supreme Court said they could not imagine a case, i.e. the general public is no longer competent to be on a jury trial. They could not imagine a case in which a child was harmed by a vaccine that the jury would not find for the child. Okay? That's a false argument, and that's what the Supreme Court put there and used for everything that it did. And the reason why it's false is because it removed the court from being objective. It became subjective. It decided what the outcomes would be. Here's the corollary argument. We cannot see a case where a child would be harmed by a physician for some treatment or action taken. Therefore, we must have an act to prevent anybody from suing doctors for the potential complications to a child. Do you think they would go along with that one?
Hell
They
no.
would. Exactly. So the fallacy in their argument has to be approached, that way. And number 3, we have, before Obama was sworn in office, Podesta, for the Obama-Biden administration coming in, asked me, and I'm sure a number of others, to hold town hall meetings on what was going to become the Affordable Care Act. Now, if an attorney puts you on the witness stand and he asks you a question, or she asks you a question, you get to answer it because they asked. If they don't ask you something, you can't just automatically come up with something. But if they ask you, you get to talk. Well, guess what? Podesta, Obama, and Biden asked me a question. So now I get to talk. I get to say, because I sent a report in on what the American people wanted. And one of the things that they wanted was for the federal government to get the heck out of healthcare. So in the book is the American Healthcare Act of 2025. Because nobody's going to read the book this year and immediately pass legislation. Let's be upfront and honest. The politician's number one job right now is, I'll give you 2 choices. A, worry about the citizens of the United States. B, get elected. Which one is it? It's B, get elected. You and everybody else are going to sit on the back burner while they get elected and pretend to represent you, since this is a republic, not a democracy. So people can read the book, we can talk about it during campaigns, and then when 2025 comes around, our government can get its act together and pass legislation based upon what the American people want, that's laid out in the book, not just telling you, but explaining why it's there. And that includes the federal government getting out of healthcare, the federal government no longer mandating to medicine or science, because it's not in the Constitution. They don't have the authority. But again, the 9th and 10th Amendments have never been heard by the Supreme Court of the United States. So we have to deal with this. And I'm not really trusting of politicians if they would take and tell me, we're never going to do that again. Well, you know what? You didn't have the power to do it the first time. You probably would have said that before had somebody asked you. And apparently we can't just go on the honor system. We need you to put it in law so that when you break it, you're a criminal. No guesses.
Which is why we need to boot them all out, especially here in Utah right now. So, Dr. Moore, after listening to this, questions, comments from you. I know it's a lot to take in.
Yeah, the thing that comes to mind is their motion that the prosecution just put forward to prevent me from presenting any data or evidence, prevent me from talking about kind of like the necessity of what it was that we did. And also to not allow any kind of injury data to be presented, and to not allow any
like the truth of what's happening.
Exactly. And so what I was thinking during this whole time that you were talking, Dr. Fleming, was that kind of the reverse is true. So if they prevent me from being able to talk about my mentality and what it was that I was doing, and what the science was that I was looking at, and the reasons and the harms that were happening, and don't allow me to present all that, are they also trying to say that they don't want to present their own evidence as to the benefits of the vaccine? And so then it's like a double whammy, right?
Yeah, here's an approach that I would encourage you and your attorneys to use. And you're welcome to listen in, prosecutors. In Nazi Germany, the doctors didn't break the law because they did what the federal government of Germany told them to do. And yet I think most of us would agree what they did was criminal. During this pandemic, what the federal government wanted doctors to do was to go along goose-stepping and follow orders. Here's the bottom line crux, and you and I have talked about this before. You and I have taken an oath. And part of that obligation to our patients is to help our patients make informed, intelligent decisions based upon the risks and benefits of anything that they might do. So I asked the question of the prosecution in the court, what is the greater responsibility of a physician? To honor an oath to protect his patients, which would include the prosecutor and the judge and the jury, because as a criminal case, you have a right to a jury. Would those individuals want their doctor to do what's in their best interest in spite of what the government's pushing, like Nazi Germany did with those doctors? Or would they want the doctor to take and put their best interest ahead, considering that the oath that we take is thousands of years old and predates this country by magnitudes of order? So the question is, are they going to hold you guilty of honoring your Hippocratic oath to put your patients first? I challenge them to look badly upon you with that when the people prosecuting you are the people who developed these biological weapons and promoted these eugenic genetic vaccines with no data that they were helpful, with 34,516 vaccine deaths, with 1.5 million maimed Americans as a result.
At least.
And the deaths from... But we don't need to speculate on whether they've got all the numbers. If 1.5 million doesn't do it, that's more maimed Americans than the U.S. military has had injuries since 1776. Their bioweapon killed 1.2 million Americans, which are more American deaths than the U.S. military has had since 1776. There are another 600,000 inflammothrombotic deaths and excess deaths, according to the CDC, not your data, not mine, the government's CDC data. In addition to that, and with 34,516 accepted vaccine deaths, with the next vaccine coming in at 53 deaths, which was the swine flu vaccine of 1976. This is not a matter of you're choosing the lesser of two evils, which is what they're trying to claim by not letting you get that evidence in, which, by the way, the judge has not ruled on yet, right?
Right. No.
So it's the judge that determines it. And you would encourage the judge to be listening to this argument and considering it, because he's probably going to see his doctor at some point in time. And in the back of his head, he better be thinking, is my doctor thinking about me and his Hippocratic oath, or is he more worried about what the federal government is going to tell him to do and not take care of me?
I have a question. Can he use the word bioweapon instead of vaccine? I mean, is that a good way to approach it?
No, the viruses are the bioweapons.
Correct.
The vaccines are eugenic genetic vaccines.
So that's what he should be.
That is
that
what
I'm
he
trying
should
to tell
call
you.
it.
Or countermeasures, right? I mean, isn't that what?
Call it what it is. It's a vaccine. It was injected for the purpose of causing immune response. Whether it was successful at that doesn't matter. Okay? I mean, you can have a car that runs poorly, and your teenage son or daughter thinks, Dad, Mom, get us this car. This looks really great, okay? And it could be a piece of junk and throw smoke out the back and cause you to gag and jerk as it's going down the road. But it's still a car, so call it a vaccine. It is. It's a genetic vaccine because it's a genetic sequence, and it's a eugenic genetic vaccine because the function of it is to insert genetic code sequences into the cell. And we know when you do that, it gets incorporated into human DNA, whether you want it to or not, because 18% of our DNA is designed to do that. And we're using the same methodology that is CRISPR, which is how bacteria take viral DNA and put it in their DNA. So call it what it is. It's a eugenic genetic vaccine with no evidence that it benefits, with the people who got the Nobel Prize showing it didn't increase interferon levels, which is harmful to people. And you took a Hippocratic oath that you were supposed to honor, that your patients, I don't know, prosecutor, judge, jury, you've got a doctor. Are you not expecting your doctor to honor his or her Hippocratic oath over to you over and above what anything the federal government will tell them is right or wrong? Because if you think the federal government is supposed to determine what's right and wrong and tell the doctors what to do, then you have just justified Nazi Germany. Which country are we living in? Nazi Germany or the United States of America?
So I have a question as a follow-up for that for Dr. Moore. So inserting that genetic code, there's no evidence that it ever turns off. So
Well, there's no, I mean, again, even just, Dr. Fleming brought this up earlier, Anthony Fauci's testimony in Congress just a couple of days ago, was that Monday? Where, he admitted there was no data or science behind, the vaccine preventing transmission or helping with the infection.
And coupled with that, with the CDC changing
he conflated both of those, as a matter of fact, and the way he described it. And they did not have any evidence of that. And Francis Collins came out and said they had no evidence on the 6 foot, kind of social distance. And Fauci said the same thing. So there was no science, no data. They're admitting it right now.
All you need to do is ask them why the vaccines were put out there anyway. This is about vaccines. Why were they put out there? Why were they put out there? And once they respond to that, they have to accept data on the EUAs. And the EUAs, I've shown this, I've done this repeatedly, I've given it demonstrations. When you statistically analyze the data from the EUA, there was no statistical reduction in deaths or infections.
Well, and how would you even know? Because they changed what the word of a vaccine is.
Laurie, it doesn't matter. It's their
It
documents.
matters to me.
But it's their
because
documents.
It's a lie.
They want to have their case. Use their documents. Don't argue with their documents. Don't argue with 1.2 million COVID deaths. Don't argue with 1.5 maimed Americans. Don't argue with an accepted 34,516 vaccine deaths. Don't argue with the fact that there is no data in the UAs showing an immune response. Don't argue with the fact that they said we won't know what happens to the children until we vaccinate them. Oh my God, that's so reminiscent of Nazi Germany. We will not know what happens to them until we do it.
Well, it's like we won't know what's in the bill until we pass it, right? So keep going back to
they are pretending to be the good guys.
Right.
Because once it's accepted, once it's recognized they're not the good guys, their argument goes out the window. Let's see, ladies and gentlemen, the jury. Yeah, we're the bad guys, and there wasn't any evidence it works. And yeah, we've been building bioweapons, and yeah, we've been pushing eugenics programs. But don't worry about that, because the bottom line is that we're the good guys, and we told them to do this.
Well, we're the good guys because
we
say that we're the good guys. That's the only part. That's the only part of that argument that makes any sense.
Well, but remember, Adolf Hitler thought he was the good guy.
No, I get it. I'm not arguing with you. I'm just saying it's coming from the person themselves saying, "Hey, look at us. We're the good guys."
We need to. The information in these two books, is COVID-19 a bioweapon and Are We the Next Endangered Species, have got to get this out in front of everybody, including the people in Utah, so they read it and they wrap their brains around it and they go, you know what? We're going to go into trial in January of 2025, and we will have read this book, and we're now going to listen to this prosecutor try to sell us that a doctor who believed it was more important to follow his Hippocratic oath and provide informed consent and tell his patients, and we've talked about this. The woman comes into you and she says, Dr. Moore, I want breast implants. I want to have these massive breasts because I will be appealing to everybody. Now, there's data on the damaging effect that these implants have on people. We know they cause inflammatory diseases. We know they cause all sorts of toxicity in the body. Your job isn't to shove those inside of women. Your job is to really, you're a plastic surgeon, for God's sake. Think about it. Is your job not, at least to some extent, to look at the 60-year-old woman who now thinks that she's going to become a Marilyn Monroe lookalike and go on talk TV and encourage people to listen to her? Or is your job to say, that's not in your best health interest, and I just can't do that for you? I'm sure you can find another doctor that will do that for you, but I can't do that for you because, in my opinion, as your doctor, that's not in your best interest, right?
We do that.
I'm sure you can go find another doctor to vaccinate you.
I do that every day.
Right? Exactly. So
one of the best pieces of advice that I ever got was the happiest patient is the one that you don't operate on. And because they, again, unrealistic expectations, risks and benefits, discussion, full disclosure of all that, informed consent of what all the problems are and what they could be.
But and I want these books and I want this video to get out there for people in Utah to realize it. What they're telling you to do is to put aside the best interest of the patient and just do whatever the heck they tell you to do. And all you are doing is the exact same thing you have done every day of your life as a physician. Right. When you had to provide informed consent to a patient. Well, you have not done anything different at this point in time.
And I just want to say, shame on those doctors who weren't giving informed consent when it came to the COVID shots, because they didn't give informed consent, or they wouldn't have taken, because the pamphlet was freaking empty.
Give informed consent because you didn't know what it was that you were doing and what it was that you were giving.
There wasn't anything. The pamphlet was empty.
That analogy,
like intentionally.
That analogy, Dr. Fleming, is very apropos. Our government is saying everybody in this country needs to get a shot in the arm. Is the same as telling me as a surgeon that every woman or every person on this planet needs to have breast implants. And so, if you take that same script and you look at it that way, am I really, or is anybody really, or even the people on the jury, going to say, oh yeah, everybody in the world needs breast implants because the government said so?
I had patients who would come into me and they would say, I would like a nuclear image so I can determine whether I should change my diet and my lifestyle. And I would look at them and say, okay, wait a minute. Other than that being just a really insulting thing to tell me as the man who developed the theory and the man who developed the test, you're telling me that if I find disease, you're going to change your diet and lifestyle to reduce disease. But if I don't find disease, even though you know what you're doing is going to promote an inflammatory thrombotic response, a future MI, stroke, something like that, you're going to continue to do it because you currently don't have heart disease, even though you know you're going to have heart disease. No, I am not going to give you a nuclear imaging study because you already know the answer to what you need to do. You're not symptomatic. I'm not going to go chasing things. You know what you're supposed to do. I'm not going to give you a nuclear imaging study. I'm not. Even listening, federal government and all the people out there, even if I could bill you $50 more for doing it the way I'm doing it, even if that is the only federal legal way to do it under the R5 documents, which is what I did. What I pled to was billing it the only legal way you could bill it. But you know what? Because they liked that, they turned around and said, that's an admission of a crime. We're good to go, right? This hypocrisy needs to stop. I love the fact that they tried Trump And the argument is nobody's above the law. You know what? That's exactly right. The federal government and the people working in it are not above the law. And you know what you call it? When what you do to somebody kills them or tries to kill them or maims them, you call that
Well, murder.
murder or attempted murder or manslaughter or maiming somebody. They're all illegal, and those are the crimes we're charging these people with when we go to criminal trial.
And I'm sure the reason that they don't want him to present the evidence is because now there's so much evidence. And people are starting to wake up. Dr. Moore, you and I talked about this today. There are people waking up. Still a lot of people asleep at the wheel, which I'm dumbfounded about. So
It's
if they're
because they're
trying to
wearing masks. It's because they're wearing masks in the car by themselves as they're going down the road doing surgery.
bingo. So
Or taking the
if
mask
they're
off to
trying,
smoke a cigarette or to take a toke on their vape pipe.
great. So if they're trying to say, listen, you can't bring in the scientific evidence that is now showing that people have been maimed, injured, and have died, because by now, almost every single person in the United States knows someone, whether it's a family member or whether it's a friend, that has been injured or have died. So they're trying to be slick about it because that's what the government does, slippery slope. What's a really good approach if they're trying to fight him on bringing the truth in? What's a good back door? I mean, what should we be telling these attorneys where people are other courts are saying the same thing?
And I don't know, Laurie, and maybe Dr. Fleming, you can expand on this a little bit, but in order to prove fraud, you have to prove intent, from what I understand.
Don't worry. That sounds really good. All you need to do is have the jury believe that when the prosecutor says there was intent, oh, okay, there's intent, right? Don't worry about that. They won't have any trouble coming up with some manipulated sentence structure that makes it sound. And your response should be, you know what, ladies and gentlemen, I did have intent. I intended to see to the best practice of medicine for my patients. I intended to fulfill my Hippocratic oath. I intended not to hurt my patient. And I intend to send a message so that your doctors, when they see you in the office, take your interest at heart and not the federal government, so that we're not dealing with Nazi doctors across the country. That's what I intended. So you're welcome, prosecutors. You have shown my intent to fulfill my Hippocratic oath.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of, that's what I was getting at, was the fact that they have to prove, or at least in theory, according to our doctrine, our legal doctrine in the United States, is proved beyond a reasonable doubt, is that I had the intent to defraud the U.S. government for what it was that we did. And where it was just the opposite, I had no intention. I wasn't even thinking about finances. I wasn't thinking about the money. I wasn't thinking about what it was, other than taking care of that patient that is sitting right there in front of me and is asking for that particular treatment, or after a disclosure of all the science and data that we had, because we had a lot of it we're talking about March, April, well, actually later than that. We're talking about May, June, July of 2021. We already had a lot of data and a lot of evidence and a lot of information that was telling us, hey, how, what these bioweapons, or what you call them, genetic eugenic injections, or eugenic vaccines were doing to people. I knew people personally that had it. It's not that hard of a concept for me to be able to espouse that and bring that out to people and say, hey, look, this was the intent. I intended to not murder and to not maim my patients. That was the intent.
I intended that my patients could make their own decision based upon the data that was available And as their physician, I had to provide them with the information that I had and what I thought was in their best interest.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to put the call-in number there. If there's any of you who are listening in and you want to call in and talk with Dr. Fleming or talk with Dr. Moore, or you have some input that's valuable, dial the number 385-899-2134. Again, dial in number 385-899-2134. Any comments, any questions for Dr. Fleming, Dr. Kirk Moore, please call in. Okay, I'll let you guys continue. Sorry, I just wanted to
No,
get that
that's
out.
fine. And somebody asked, what's the title of the book? Are we the next endangered species? Bioweapons, eugenics, and more. We live in a country that has been well funded by the people of the country. We probably have the best medical system in the world, but we have also been manipulated and controlled. Let me give you background on the medical system. The American Medical Association also began in the late 1800s. It was a group of people who said, we're going to call ourselves the American Medical Association. 1 in 4 physicians in the United States belongs to the AMA. 1 in 4. I'd hardly call that here's that term, mandate, right? There's the correct use of that term. 1 in 4 is not exactly a mandate that the AMA represents doctors. How did it get formed? A group of people who got together decided, well, if we tell the state and federal governments that we'll give them this control over medicine, they will give us control as the AMA over physicians. I think that's called prostitution in some cases, but it may not be a bad recognition, considering that Fauci and Daszak really are more like the drug dealers on the street. Maybe they've been pimping out, the people they're working with. The problem is that it's the bosses that we really need to get to, which are the federal government, the DOD, the CIA, Health and Human Services, which help fund biological weapons. I think these are the same folks that were in charge of some of the genetic vaccines, weren't they? Let's see. I know the DOD was involved, and I know HHS was involved. I don't know why they would have a vested interest in promoting something that is illegal by the Biological Weapons Convention Treaty, by the 1989 Anti-Terrorism Act, and the 2012 Federal Law 18 U.S.C. Section 175. Don't know why they'd have an interest in just pressing that and pushing that across the boards. Don't know why they would feel that doctors should be forcing patients to get injections when Cruzen v. Missouri was a federal case heard by the Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court said, you cannot force a competent adult to take any treatment. I mean, let's see, Marbury versus Madison said the Supreme Court decided what was the law of the land and what was constitutional. But apparently their decision on Cruzen v. Missouri didn't matter because, I don't know, either they became amnestic or the federal government thought none of you had ever heard of the case. So just remember, our federal government and the people prosecuting Dr. Moore are of the perspective that a physician honoring their oath, taking care of their patients, is more important, is less important than a doctor who follows his orders from the government, like they did in Nazi Germany.
So, Dr. Fleming, is that so? Marlboro versus Madison, you and I have talked about it.
Marbury versus Madison.
Is that a good case for even Dr. Moore's, attorneys or any attorneys out there fighting the same battle to protect people like Dr. Moore? Is that a good case for them to become more educated?
Well,
I know
I think
it's wrong. I've looked at it.
So, well, it's not wrong. It's the law of the land.
No, long.
Law. Okay.
Yes.
So I have two comments on that. First, I think anybody should become better educated on anything they're involved with, right? So is it a good idea for attorneys to become better educated with it? Here's my thought. If you have a law degree, if you went and actually completed law college and got your JD and you don't know about Marbury versus Madison, you should go get your money back.
Well, there are a lot of doctors out there giving the bioweapon.
Look,
They went to medical school.
I have a lot of issues with a lot of doctors for a lot of reasons. But that's true of scientists and lawyers also. My take on this is that I don't think Marbury versus Madison is important in this. I think Cruzen v. Missouri is an issue. I think bringing up the fact that there was no information on the inserts, and you've seen me do those because I did that on stage in June or July of 2021, whatever month that was, where I had
right. And we do have a caller.
Oh, good.
So why don't we, Leighton? Why don't we bring in the call? But before we do that, Dr. Fleming, I have a question. Can Dr. Moore put that pamphlet into his case? Will they let him submit that? Intentionally left blank? Oh, and they hung up, so we're good.
Oh, sorry. So what's permitted in trial? What Dr. Moore was just talking about was these motions that are being filed by the prosecutors and his defense attorneys about what can and can't be brought in the case. And that's part of what the discussion is going to be. What evidence can be and what evidence cannot be introduced in the case. It is always nice to have documents like that available. That if for example, the prosecutors prevent that from, they work with the judge and the judge says that can't be presented, and then somebody asks Dr. Moore, how would you normally provide informed consent? Where would you look for information to provide informed consent about, I don't know, giving a drug to somebody? Well, I'd look on the package inserts. Oh, well, have you looked at the package inserts on these genetic vaccines? Yes. And what did they show? Well, the only thing on them are the words intentionally blank. Well, do you have a copy of those inserts? And the prosecutor may say, I object, but the reality is, all you need is for the jury to know they're intentionally blank, right? And by the way, if they get the book and read it, they'll see a picture of a woman at my event holding it up that says intentionally blank. It's kind of hard to bury that knowledge once people have read it.
Okay, we have a caller coming in too. So Leighton, just let us know when you're going to bring them in. So did that make sense, Dr. Moore, on the pamphlet? I think it's important, but
yeah, I actually have a pamphlet, here. So if it's possible for me to bring it in, I will bring it in.
Okay, let's take the caller first, and then we'll bring it in. All right, Leighton, we're ready.
Want to know if there's some way that, or if there's a website that to help fund the doctor's lawsuits, or at least help with his legal bills. Does he have a GoFundMe or some type of fundraising that's going on? I mean, I think he's a hero for standing up for his patients against the giant bureaucracy that was out there, and we need doctors that care about their patients.
That's a really great comment, and we're just going to put up we're just going to put up Dr. Moore's website really quick because I think it needs to be out there. I mean, we want to do this grassroots effort to where, we're able to help Dr. Moore and other doctors. I mean, we'll have Dr. Fleming talk about 10letters.org. Leighton, can you just put that up there really quick for, we have over 1,000 listeners. And I always like to say, when the government is coming after the people who are courageous, the people who are standing up. I mean, Dr. Fleming, you're one of those doctors, the doctors who aren't afraid that, oh my gosh, I can't say anything. I can't call a spade a spade. I talk about this all the time. Listen, it's a bioweapon. If you can't use the word bioweapon, you shouldn't be calling it anything else because that's what it is. And that's just my opinion. So, Dr. Moore, why don't you just tell us the website? We're looking at it online right now. Tell us a little bit about that, and then we'll get back to our talk.
So right after the indictment, thanks, Laurie. Right after the indictment, my friends and family put this site up to help us collect donations to cover the legal defense fund. I mean, as you can imagine, it's gotten very expensive and will continue to be expensive. So it's a Give, Send, Go site, and Stand for More is the kind of the title of it, but I believe Stand for More wasn't available, so we had to put in different words so that the actual URL, I think, is GiveSendGo/Fight for More. But I can provide you. I think I provided you with a link and sent it, sent through. So I don't know how to, get people in. I think if you just search for my name on there, it'll probably come up as well.
Yeah, and they can send in an info at thewellnesscrusaders.com, and I'd be happy to send the link as well.
Well, and I think there's the complimentary website Stand for Less, which is the federal government's fundraising effort.
Government's got all the money in the world to
No, it doesn't.
after.
It doesn't. The problem is that it's taking our money and then making magic money and doing whatever it wants to do.
Well, it's using it against all of us, using it against you too. I mean, it's corruption at its finest. And unless we change it here in Utah, which, I know Phil Lyman, we're hopeful that he's going to get in. He got 67% of the votes at the state conference. We have people like Frank Mylar, Dr. Mike Kennedy. We have a whole group here that could change the way that things are done, that are willing to fight and to help Dr. Moore. But we've got to stand. We've got to find the courage, or America is not America as we know it. Utah won't be like Utah, but it will change.
And that's why the reason why the book has the title it is, Are We the Next Endangered Species? The answer to that question is going to be determined by what people do now. And part of the answer to that question is going after the federal government for the development of biological weapons and the development of eugenic genetic vaccines. It doesn't mean the vaccines don't have some potential benefit, but this was not a potential benefit. And this told physicians to think more about what the government told them to do than their Hippocratic oath. And that Hippocratic oath is not doing the lesser of two evils. It is doing the only right thing that he can do.
Well, the answer to the question in your book, Are We the Next Endangered Species, is a blatant yes.
It depends upon what we do.
And we have two more callers that Leighton has in, so let's take.
We're certainly at risk of it, Dr. Moore. We're at risk of it, but it's what we do. And there has never been any time in history that people cannot do the right thing. Every time a corrupt government was overturned, every time somebody who stood up for what was right was eventually lifted up on the shoulders of the people. It was the people. It was never us. It was never the people out front. It was the people behind us, lifting and supporting us, that made it possible. And we should never forget that.
Exactly.
All right, that's something we definitely don't need to forget. Let me bring in our current caller that we have here. Jim Peterson, you are on live with the Wellness Crusaders. What question do you have for them today?
Yeah, I was just wondering if there's a directory out there of physicians that think like Dr. Moore and Dr. Fleming that don't give us no grief when we tell them that we're not vaccinated and we feel like we have good reasons to do not get vaccinated.
I don't know of an actual directory. I know that there's some websites where people have brought up, the flccc.org, the American Association of Physicians and Surgeons, and then you have the names that are out there that everybody kind of recognizes: Dr. Peter McCullough, Dr. Pierre Corey, Dr. Paul Merrick, a number of docs that are out there that are doing it, that can be spoken to directly. My Free Doctor, I think it's myfreedoctors.com or myfreedoctor.com, which is a Ben Marble has set up for telemedicine, has the ability to kind of take care of patients that are freedom-oriented patients that don't want to be subjected to mandates. Those are the ones that I can tell you about. I don't know, Dr. Fleming, if you have any others.
So I don't know if there's any specific network, and part of the problem is that up until this point in time, I don't think people are really running around trying to identify themselves. I don't really feel like I have much of a choice on discussing the topics because I have, a career at stake. I have 55 years of science, 38 of medicine, and 10 of law, and every one of the oaths and obligations that I've taken on have been doing the right thing for the right reasons. So it's clear that not everybody feels that way. It's clear that a lot of people have kind of taken the perspective of just trying to lay low and stay out of trouble. But that part of the problem there is that is exactly what happens across the United States right now. There's not a single American, I think, who probably gets a letter from any agency, any official agency, whose first thought probably isn't, what did I do wrong? It's not, what is this agency doing for me? It's like President Ronald Reagan said, what is it, 9 words that most Americans feel concerned about, or whatever the number is. I'm from the government and I'm here to help you.
Yeah, the 6 words
right?
that you never want to hear.
Yeah.
So yeah, but there won't be a directory, at least not right now, because you're just going to put a target on your back. So if anybody ever publishes a directory online, then those people will just be out for being targeted. So we're getting there, but we're not reaching that point yet.
Maybe we need to put something up on the dark web for honest people.
I think the problem is that we don't feel like coming out of the closet yet.
Ah.
Well,
but
I'm glad you guys are out of the closet. So.
Dr. Fleming, for the caller, there is a place, and I'm sorry I didn't get your first name, but there is a place that you can, thank you, that you can have an impact for your voice to be heard against the indictment of Fauci and Barrick. And I'll let Dr. Fleming talk just about that. It's 10letters.org. It's the number 10. And actually, for Utah, I'm from Utah. So if we can get our governor, which is not going to be Cox, unfortunately, but if we get Phil Lyman in, and we get the people that a good AG and a good governor, that's where change begins, where all the other rigmarole with them coming after you to force you to take a shot or force you to wear a mask, which they can no longer do in Utah. That's what helps. But Dr. Fleming, why don't you just talk for a few minutes about 10letters.org, because that is also very helpful for Dr. Moore.
So 10letters.org is going to be instrumental for not only Dr. Moore, but every American. 10letters.org is a website. So the number 10 followed by the word letters, letters.org, is the website that you can go on to, and you should go on to. It will ask for you to enter your name and address, and it will then make a cover letter for you, about a 5 or 6 page cover letter, one for your governor and one for your attorney general. You can download those, print those. It even has the address for your governor and your attorney general when you make the letter. So you can cut that out, stick it on the envelope, and mail it in. There is also a place that says email, which allows you to then click on that email, and it will bring up an already made email for you that explains what you're doing, what you're sending to somebody about this website. And then you just enter the email address of 10, 20, however many people you've got in your email list, send it off, and encourage them to do the same thing, and have them send in, and then have them send their friends and relatives and people they have emails to do the same thing and build those letters. I know we're over 10,300 at this point in time, and it is going to grow. And here's the reason why I know it's going to grow.
And Dr. Fleming, I got to ask you a question. Which are the top 5 states? And I'm going to just say Utahns. If we're gonna support Utah, we gotta get it out there. But what are the top 5 states? I know Texas, of course.
So I know Texas is one of those. Just a second, I can pull it up myself and look. Texas is one. Florida, California. For the
Of
people
all
who think that-
places.
Of all places.
California over Utah.
So I'm just trying to bring it up here. We'll see if it will pop up. And I'm not sure if the next ones are, but over 10,300. Here's why I know it's going to work. One, it's the right thing to do. And we have all been beaten to death for the last 4 years. Some of us a little bit longer, but for 4 years, you've seen the impact this has on your life. 2, on Monday, the 17th of June, myself and the other people that are part of this 10 Letters campaign, Dr. Kevin McCarran, Mr. Charles Rixey, Dr. Johanna Duff, and Dr. Johanna Deinert and Dr. Andrew Huff, are all presenting materials to the government of Slovakia on their COVID investigation. So Slovakia is taking this seriously, and they're next door to Ukraine, where the Hunter Biden people are at. On the 19th of June, Wednesday evening at 8 p.m., you can check out my website on Twitter. There's going to be a Twitter space where we are going to have these same people, Dr. McCarran, Mr. Rixey, Dr. Deinert, Dr. Huff, myself, along with Ms. Gagan here, and some other individuals talking about 10 letters and going after criminal indictments. And I can tell you that the impact of these 10,300 letters and the efforts that I have been putting in for the last several years to get criminal indictments are moving forward. We have several places where the AGs are interested, and we have several locations in the country that I'm not going to announce for another couple weeks, are planning to file criminal indictments on Fauci, Kellens, Gates, and a variety of other individuals that are responsible for these biological weapons having been made and subsequently getting out of the lab, killing people, the consequence of which was chaos, a eugenics genetics vaccine program thrown in the mix, not helping anybody, and forcing doctors like Dr. Moore to make a decision. Do I go along like the Nazi doctors did, or do I keep my Hippocratic oath and stand up for my patients and say, I can't advise you to do this. There are risks, and I see no benefits. This is going to happen. So the question is, do the viewers, do the listeners want to be part of the solution, or do they want to wait for somebody else to step up and help them? Well, there's that old saying, and I don't remember who wrote it, but I included it in the book, that when they came after the Jews, I didn't respond because I wasn't Jewish. When they came after the scientists, I didn't respond because I wasn't a scientist. And you could throw in there, when they came after the doctors, I didn't respond because I wasn't a doctor. And then when they came after me, there wasn't anybody left.
And we were talking about that today with
Yeah,
Dr.
you know,
Moore.
Laurie, you and I were talking about that today, exactly.
And that's bingo. I mean, we have to stand now. People keep asking me, well, what do I do? Well, your vote's got to matter. You've got to walk your vote into it. You've got to stand up. You have to have the courage. Put a sign up in your yard for the people who are running. We have a whole list of all of the good people here in the state of Utah. Don't automatically assume that you're going to think somebody's good. Ask somebody who really diehard knows. And I can say Phil Lyman for governor on this, but we have to get it out there because your governor and your AG is what's going to matter to Utah. And talking about 10letters.org, we're not even on the top 10. So 10letters.org, have your vote count, have your voice count. I mean, we have to do it. We have to change the way it's going. Or just like Dr. Moore and I were talking about it, guess what? June 25th, it's a make or break. We don't get the people that we need on the ballot. Utah
And
is
and
hurting.
you don't just get to vote for these people. You need to be behind these people. You need to insist what topics you want them to address. You need to be there, and you need to make them know that they are supported as well, because if not, when they get in office, they are going to be usurped by the powers that be, just like everybody else. Now, here's the list: Texas, California, Florida. Take a guess at what the next state is.
Illinois?
New York.
Well, we know that's not going anywhere. It's for another.
Oh, don't do that. That is wrong.
Well, I'm just saying it's so corrupt with what they did with Trump.
Also, on the 19th, we know they're corrupt. I'm a convicted felon, remember? Because I put my patients first and refused to give them 2 doses of radiation and accurately measured their test and found disease that was being missed in 25 to 35% of them, okay? So we don't take that approach that there's corruption in the system. We take the approach, if the system's corrupt, we are going to insist that it works. Who will join us on the 19th is also Ian Carpenter, who is running efforts in the state of New York, in the city of New York City, to hold these criminals accountable. And he's saying, and he will join us on the 19th on that Twitter space, to say, send him information about the people running for office, that there are a lot of people that, you know what, a couple hundred votes determines whether you get into office. And a couple hundred people is not that hard to come by.
True.
Ohio is the next state, then Illinois. So you have got, I have lived in many states in this country in my life, and I can tell you that no matter what state you think you're in, you live in a 60-40 state. The question is which is the 60 and which is the 40. But it tells you across the board that the American population is frustrated, angered. You can hear it in my voice. You can hear it in your voice. You can hear it in the people on the podcast. You can hear the frustration in Dr. Moore's voice. You can hear it in people having these conversations. It reflects the tone of the country, that we all know something is wrong, and somebody, and that's us, steps up to fix it. You're not doing this for me. You're doing it for yourself and for your children and your grandchildren. You can do it for Dr. Moore. You can do it for Donald Trump. You can do it for the candidates that Laurie just mentioned in Utah, because she's closely connected with them. And then you hold them accountable. Do not practice what we've been doing, which is we vote them in and we trust that they will be for us. You hold them accountable. You remind them what they ran for office on, and you remind them that they are your representatives, which means they represent you. They represent us, and they determine what these people do eventually get by within the courts, because that little prosecutor in Utah could be replaced in a heartbeat.
Well, we're hoping. So, Dr. Fleming, you did a crimes against humanity in New Jersey.
We did.
So why would a New Jersey lawyer, why should they be on your Twitter space? What are they going to learn? Because I do believe that New Jersey is it's a pretty good state to also be in.
Why should they be there? 1.2 million dead Americans, 1.5 million maimed Americans. Everybody knows somebody who's been affected. They should be there to get the facts, to be able to understand that the United States federal government and these individuals like Fauci and Collins and people like Gates and others funded the development of biological weapons. Now, I'm originally a physicist. We don't have a law against building nuclear weapons. We have laws against building biological weapons. You drop a nuclear device on somebody, it kills the people there. Unless there's a big airflow, it kills the people there, it doesn't spread. You drop a biological weapon on somebody, guess what? What happens? It spreads
Or you
around the
inject a
planet.
biological weapon into somebody. That's even worse.
Well, you inject the code sequence that represents the biological weapon, and the problem is, where's the data that shows the doctor's job is to help the patient make a decision. Is this the right thing for you? That's our oath. It's 2,000 years old. You're following your oath. You're doing your job. If you don't, they consider it malpractice. So what are you, a criminal because you don't follow the Nazi goose step, or are you a civil litigant because of medical malpractice? It's a nice place to be as a doctor, isn't it?
Yeah, I
So,
love
Doc,
it. I'm sitting here just kind of enjoying every minute of it.
so Dr. Moore, as we get ready to wrap up, we'll give you the final words. Again, I want to, Leighton, if you could just put up his site one more time. I want to give you the final word. As a medical doctor in the state of Utah who's fighting to keep his license on the government corruption that would rather silence you and shut you up, what's your final word for all the Utahns out there?
Well, we touched on it. And we mentioned it throughout this discussion in this podcast. It's nobody's going to look out for you like you. And all politics starts locally. So we have to get involved locally in our communities, in our cities, in our counties, in our states, and obviously then even into the federal government. But we have to get involved, and we have to realize that we have a voice, and we, just like Dr. Fleming was saying, that we have to hold people accountable to that. They do. They represent us, and then they need to be reminded sometimes that they represent us. We're not sending people to office, whether it be in the state office here, in the county council here, or in the federal government. We're not sending them there to do their bidding as they see fit. We are sending them there to do our bidding, and they should be coming to us asking us what they expect of us, and we need to remind them of what they expect of us. The interesting thing is, just like we were talking about, Dr. Fleming, the American Medical Association has a clause in their ethics bylaws that says a physician is required, and first of all has to abide by their Hippocratic oath to take care of their patients. We talked about this as well. Only 25% of physicians are members of the AMA, but we are required to abide by our oath to our patients over and above anything else. And then if it does come into conflict with the law, that we are supposed to try to take steps to change the law to make it so that the treatment that we provide our patients comes into, change the law so that the laws then come into, concert, and they abide by our oath to take care of our patients. But in the end, if we get to a point where those conflicts can't be resolved, we are, by our oath, responsible and expected to take care of our patients as they come to us, and not take care of people in the interest of public health or people in the interest of some sort of government mandatory or some sort of arbitrary or government mandate to do things. So my last word is to make sure that we stand up for ourselves and make sure that we push back and make sure that we do the right thing and try to educate the people around us as to what is that's going around. We mentioned it briefly, and again, Dr. Fleming, you brought it up. The quote was a Martin Niemöller quote, talking about first they came for the socialists, and I wasn't a socialist, so that I didn't basically didn't pay attention. I didn't help them. Then they came for the communists, and I'm not a communist, and so they didn't help. So I didn't help them either. Then they came for me, and I looked over my shoulder, and there wasn't anybody left. And that applies to all of us now. If we don't start standing up for ourselves and don't start standing up for our rights and don't start standing up for our liberties and our freedoms, we're eventually going to look over our shoulder and realize that there's nobody else left there to help us.
I agree, and I love that. And listen, I'm a believer. I don't hold back on that. I'm a Christian believer. They crucified Jesus, convicted him guilty. I still follow him. So I'm just saying, for those people in Utah, or really any of the listeners out here, and I don't usually put this out, but Dr. Moore is on Utah, and we're standing for Dr. Moore. If you go to givesendgo.com/fight, the number 4, more, MOORE. If you could pledge $1, I will match $1 up to $5,000. So you can get a hold of me by sending me an email at info@thewellnesscrusaders.com. Utah, go to 10letters.org. That's the number 10, 10letters.org. Send the governor, send the AG, have a voice. You could either send it with your name or you can send it anonymously if you just don't quite have the courage yet to stand up. You can send it in without your name. But I'm praying that everyone in the state of Utah finds the courage to take one step and have a voice and rule the corruption out of the state of Utah. And it starts with the head guy. It starts with Cox. We need Phil Lyman in order to protect all of us. So thank you both. Dr. Fleming, I'm always honored to be on any podcast that I can with you. You always invite me. I'm always learning something. And Dr. Moore, thank you so very much. We need to stand up for you. We need to let you know, the people need to let you know that we are here to back you. So thank you both very much, and good night for now.
Good night. Thank you for the invitation and being here. Dr. Moore, all the best. You may want to know that the indictments, the criminal indictments, actually has at the end the American Medical Association violation of those medical ethics for those of us that are doctors, and that would include Dr. Fauci and Dr. Collins.
Right. Well, thank you. Thanks, Laurie, for having me. Great
Thank you.
being with you.